Hi, this is Zena Harris.
And I'm Mark Rabin.
Welcome to the tie-in.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the tie-in. This morning, we have the pleasure of speaking with Jonah Geschwind. He's the CEO of Green Disco. And I met Jonah behind the scenes recently at New York Climate Week when we were getting a tour of the Show Power concert batteries that were powering the Global Citizen concert in the Central Park. And right away, I was taken by this young gentleman, and his passion for green events and music just came through. And I thought right away, I'm like, let's jump on a call. I want to hear more about your story. And I realized, let's get this guy on and hear about his story and his passion for greening the music industry.
Yeah, I'm excited to meet him. This is the kind of stuff that we really want to highlight. These are people who are out there doing great things. I think Jonah is a great representation of that. And this just goes to show we're out there talking to lots of different people and we find folks who are really into it. Like we want to hear what's going on with them, what drives them, that sort of thing. So excited to talk to him.
Totally, especially from that younger generation, like very much younger. A lot of folks in sustainability, are sort of older millennials to Gen X, and yeah, this I don't even know what generation Jonah's from, but we'll find out.
All right, let's dive in.
Hey, everybody, welcome to the tie-in, and we're speaking with Jonah Geschwind this morning, who is the CEO of Green Disco. And welcome, Jonah.
Thank you so much for having me. Super excited to be on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, in our little intro, we mentioned a little bit about you, but we'd love to hear a little bit about your story and what got you into the sustainability space.
I've been in the event space, I'd say, for almost my entire life. I remember I was in seventh grade. I made a pitch deck to convince my parents to let me go to Coachella, which ended up working and got my first ever experience in these kind of large events. I got really into sustainability in a kind of unique way. It was my junior year of high school specifically, and I had the really unique opportunity of living abroad. And so I went from living my daily life in Los Angeles to Copenhagen. And a very simple way to articulate the difference is riding my car everywhere or driving my car everywhere versus riding my bike everywhere. And very simply, the idea of sustainability wasn't only made really easy to do, but it was also made very cool. And that really stuck with me. And I came back to Los Angeles and Santa Monica specifically, really motivated to make an impact. I started working with Insomniac Events, which is promoter and subsidiary of Live Nation. They're doing large scale events and festivals like EDC Vegas, Nocturnal Wonderland, Escape, a lot of others as well. And firsthand got the experience that a lot of these event promoters, they're more focused on their experience than anything, as they should be. And sustainability is really left to the wayside in a lot of the different operational elements that really kind of come to play to putting on these events. And I really kind of saw that as a niche. Was interning my senior year of high school, essentially created a pitch and proposal of all these sustainable initiatives that already existed in Europe. They'd already been done, they'd already been proven. And why reinvent the wheel? Let's just apply these initiatives and bring them over to the US. And so started working directly with my boss there on actually integrating these different things. And it was very clear to me, even without an academic background, I could really start to make an impact, and went to Tulane University, and I created my own major in music business and sustainability to get that academic background. I was working directly with the head of sustainability at the university to create my own syllabus, workload, and all that type of stuff. COVID happened my my sophomore year of college, which was a very weird time, to say the least. Obviously, went from in person to Zoom classes. And events obviously stopped, but I knew that they were going to come back, and inevitably going to come back in a way where we can help bring them back stronger and in a new mind, so to say, for this post-COVID era. So that was really, say, more or less been on this journey of kind of entertainment and sustainability, and I've been able to merge them, but I've never just seen it as kind of just sustainability, so to say, or just entertainment. It's something where in almost any or everything I do, it needs to be sustainably minded, either financially, also environmentally, in kind of every single facet, so to say.
Wow. So
Hmm.
you as a junior in high school were talking to your boss at the time and trying to get, sustainability kind of integrated into what was going on based on what you had seen. And then you created your own major in college to kind of encompass music and sustainability. Is like, how can you just walk us through like maybe, your approach to that? How did you do that? What walk us through that?
Stuff. And then also just it was senior year of high school as well. I don't know if I misspoke there, but senior year of high school is when I was kind of having that internship with Insomniac, and at least at Tulane University, which is where I went. I didn't even really realize before going, but they have more festivals than days of the year in New Orleans.
Wow.
So it
Okay.
is a live event hotbed, and in best possible way. And going to these a lot of events, I'd say New Orleans specifically is also a place that's so beautiful and so rich in culture, but infrastructurally speaking, is been devastated through Katrina and through so many other just hurricanes and just awful things. And the government really has not responded in the best way possible. And so something where they have all these amazing events, but they also do not have waste infrastructure to support these events. And so you're
Yeah.
just seeing so much waste after, more than you would in any
Yeah.
other
Just
state.
plastic waste, thick plastic waste everywhere.
Mardi Gras is a perfect example
Yeah.
of it, where it's like they're handing out beads and there's no place for them to go otherwise afterwards except for a landfill. And then they have like lead and all these other just harmful contaminants, which then seep into the ground and so many awful things with it. And so going to New Orleans and Tulane specifically, I'd say there are a lot of entrepreneurs, innovators, and that landscape as well. Just seeing everything firsthand and in a place where it was happening so intensely, it just became so crystal clear to me. Some of my friends at university and in my frat actually, they created the first ever glass recycling program in the entire city. They started it right out of our frat backyard,
Wow.
so unsafe and unhealthy to do because it was like a $10,000 machine where like we were literally just recycling glass. But now they're officially recognized by the city as the official glass recycling hub. They have like multiple different warehouses. And so being in the environment exposed to these types of people who are actively making change, I at least saw it as such a cool opportunity to create my own path, so to say, in a place where it's a little bit difficult to, and had great support of professors. As I was mentioning, the director of sustainability at Tulane was working directly with her, Elizabeth Davy. She no longer works there, but amazing mentor and supporter, and helped me create my own syllabus and all these types of things. It was a pain to do. I had to maintain certain GPAs, get a lot of different teachers to write recommendations and all those sorts of things, but ended up being an amazing experience for me just to always see a path for myself rather than kind of conforming to anything that I don't really see in my own path, let's say.
It's very
Yeah.
rock and roll on its own. Um, just take us back to what you had observed in Denmark, and that what you brought back to the US, because that's something that caught my ear there, and maybe for the listeners as well.
It was just these super simple daily behaviors and kind of things that the city infrastructure supported, and that people didn't really talk about. And it was what I realized was just the perception about sustainability in a very high level. And so it's something where having unbelievable biking infrastructure that made it easy to bike, and if anything, faster to bike than to drive a car.
Hmm.
They had 180% taxing on cars. So if you were to buy a $100,000 car, you're paying 280K. So creating the incentives to do the sustainable things and then disincentivizing the unsustainable option, it just made it commonplace to be sustainable. And it made it really cool to do too. I always kind of went around and saw these people where it's like the fridges even and freezers are half the size of what they are in the US, but people are a lot more mindful about what they're consuming or eating. They're not going to the store and just buying a ton of things and then shoving in the fridge and then eating what they do and not what they don't do and then throwing it out. The whole culture was a lot more just mindful and aware. And at least what I took away from that was that it's this two-sided marketplace, so to say, of like you have the city or you have like the high-level organizers, and then you have the people. And the way that the organizers play a big role is creating the infrastructure that allows people to do that sustainable thing easily. Because if I go to a city and it's hard to bike, I'm not going to bike. I don't bike in LA because the city doesn't allow me to. And with festivals specifically, I've always seen them as a microcosm of cities. I minored in urban design as well and been very fascinated with all that. But with festivals, you need to house, feed, have the sanitation for 100 to 1,000 people over X amount of days. And so in a very similar way, these organizers create the infrastructure that allow their fans to either be sustainable or not. If I go to a festival and the only water is through plastic water bottle, I'm going to be consuming plastic whether I like it or not. And so I'd say that was the main takeaway for me in kind of that high level sense and philosophical sense is understanding how I can really kind of apply that to the US and specifically in the event space where we're working, how we can kind of the push and pull on both the organizer side and how they directly influence the fans and how these fans can also kind of have their voice heard, so to say. If they're all talking about wanting an easier time to come or to the event, there's clear bottlenecks or things like that, the organizers will conform because they obviously want the fans to have the best experience. So that was the biggest takeaway, as well as just a lot of other things. I'd say LA is a very materialistic place, and Copenhagen is a very socialist place. So getting out of the bubble and experiencing a very different way of life was also just really big, I'd say, for my personal development at such a young age as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it is so cool to experience other cultures and kind of take in, like see that and take it in and then put it into action. That's so awesome that you were like, hey, what about doing these things? And making, making slight changes or big changes even, I guess. What's something that you did in that time that you were like really proud of, like, coming from the sort of Denmark culture and maybe trying to do it here in the US? Is there anything in particular that you got through?
When I returned from Copenhagen, I had kind of like an informal internship essentially for the city of Santa Monica. I was connected with the chief sustainability officer at the time, this guy Dean Kubani, who's awesome, super, super impressive and very, very intelligent guy. And so I was essentially working on trying to integrate more biking infrastructure. I'd say the main thing I loved about Copenhagen was the bikeability of the city and trying to bring that into Los Angeles and Santa Monica specifically. It was a very, and just say my experience with public government in general is just it takes time and it's a slower, more bureaucratic process, and that's what I experienced. But it was really cool to see a company like Bird Scooters come around, which was very innovative at the time and kind of pushing these boundaries, which to some extent forced the city and public to make the infrastructure to support it because people were riding on sidewalks pretty recklessly. They were riding on streets, getting hit in a lot of accidents. And
Yeah.
so a lot of the work that I was trying to work on in terms of actually having biking lanes and the infrastructure to support it actually got developed kind of matter of time through these public private companies, so to say. So that was a big thing for me. And then specifically, I'd say like later on at Insomniac and all that type of stuff, definitely a lot of other things that I'm very proud of in terms of just the work that I've done. And in a weird way, it's all felt like it's led up to the development of Green Disco, where I was working on a lot of different projects, either making certain aspects of events sustainable or even just within school working on these different types of projects that kind of coalesced to right when COVID started, me having the actual kind of confidence in my abilities to do stuff.
Tell us about Green Disco.
Yeah, how did it come together?
It's been a little over 4.5 years, which is pretty crazy. But we started out essentially right when COVID happened, had a lot of time to build in the dark, I would say. But as I was kind of mentioning, the idea is to help these more boutique and independent festivals. My whole philosophy is working with a company that's a subsidiary of Live Nation. They have the resources to do a lot of these things, but what about the events that don't? How can we help those events at least take the first steps forward? So essentially created Green Disco with that philosophy in mind. We created a few different programs. Our main program in kind of business is a environmental consultancy and advisory. So we're helping do the actual kind of data collection to understand the negative impacts, actually introducing the initiatives to reduce and mitigate those impacts as well, and then reporting on it as well. We created two of our own products. At the time, we only had one, but it's called the Eco Band.
Oh,
And so it's essentially a wristband that's made entirely out of hemp, completely plastic free, and each one supports a different type of environmental outcome. So this one removed 10 pounds of plastic waste from a riverway in upstate New York for a festival that we were doing in upstate New York. But the idea is very localized, different kind of impacts for each specific event. And these were very successful. We're still doing these with boutique events. We've been able to sell these to an average of 14% of ticketed audiences at that $20 cost, which essentially shows that fans are willing to spend more to support positive outcomes and sustainability. And the way that we introduced this was entirely fan-led program. So we don't charge event organizers anything for this. It's essentially a platform that allows their fans who want to get involved the ability to get involved, and then essentially helps fund impacts on their behalf at $0, so to say. But yeah, we've essentially grown a lot from just these wristbands because that was how we really started. And now we're working with festivals. We do some brand activations, done a few random artist projects as well, a venue, and kind of working through our core advisory business. We just launched a software that's hyper focused on fan travel and transportation. I'd say over the past 4.5 years, it's become
Footprint, right?
exactly.
Okay.
Uh, but yeah, we're new to market with that. We just had a successful launch and kind of demo this past summer, and now we're really focused on bringing it to market for 2025.
And so you clearly identified, and that's something that we've seen a lot in live events. A lot, most of the emissions are actually from fan travel to and from the events.
It's up to like 95% in all the events that we've done, and never less than like 70%.
Mhm.
Given we're also doing a lot more destination-oriented festivals and
Yeah.
those types of things, where it is a little higher. But in every single case, I was at the Aspen Institute Climate Conference in 2022, the inaugural one, and I remember Adam Silver spoke, NBA commissioner, about the NBA impacts and emissions. He's like, most people harp on the teams for flying private and doing these things, but it's minimal when you look at the actual fan travel to and from the stadiums. And so that's where I know that he at least mentioned they're focusing a lot of their efforts. That really stuck with me. And I really saw it as this elephant in the room where
Mhm.
organizers view it as out of their control. They don't really understand what's going on. And they're currently relying on billing zip codes, which are very inaccurate. Fans have no idea what their current impacts are, let alone what they can do to reduce it. And then it's just always the largest emitter. So a really meaningful solution to address that, I think, would add a lot of value to the market and really make a lot of meaningful change in a really great way.
Yeah.
yeah.
And maybe save money.
Hopefully, hopefully on the fan side too. I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of ways where you can actually incentivize sustainable transport that's a lot cheaper. I even know in the city it's like riding a city bike or using the metro versus an Uber, always more cost effective. So the
Yeah.
solution,
And to incentivize, but like for example, like Burning Man has the burner buses, right, from to and from different areas. And I believe they get to bypass the lineup, right?
and
So something like that.
And it's so small too, but instead of calling it a shuttle,
Yeah.
calling it a burner bus, calling it a party bus, even of like with your ticket, get a party bus pass. Like
Yeah.
simple, small changes like that, which not only make it easy for a fan to do, but also make it cool. Those are really kind of the changes that we've found make sustainability a lot more adoptable and at least resonate a lot more with fans as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just fun too. Like I live in the Seattle area and going to like MLS soccer games and whatnot. There's a Sounders train that goes directly to, and people love it. The fans, show up, they get on, they go. So like it can happen across the board with lots of different events. So yeah, totally fun.
100%. But yeah, Green Disco at least has been going strong, and at least for this next year, yeah, we're looking to support all types of events. We're working with conferences as well this next year, which is super exciting. Say any type of destination oriented event or even permanent event where the built environment is already there, but obviously operations are always changing, and there's ways that you can improve the operational performance.
100%, 100%. I was just at a conference last week. Would have loved to have seen you there. Because
What
I
was it? The
talked
built
to,
sustainable brands? Is that what it
yeah,
is? Yeah.
yeah. Me looking behind the scenes and whatnot, saw a generator and I was like following the cable and talked to the activation folks, and I'm like, hey, what's going on here? What are you doing? What are you powering? So would love to see more of that at conferences for sure, for sure. It's
Especially
great.
environmental conferences too. You got to practice what they
Hmm.
preach.
I know, I know, I know.
But
So
it's all about awareness. I mean, half of them don't even know.
yeah, I think
I'd
that's the key really is just bringing this to their attention because it's already an environmental conference, for example.
Yeah, I'd say what I always kind of say is not we're more limited by the educational barrier than we are by technology right now. A lot of the things that we're even introducing and recommending for our partners to do aren't the most revolutionary things. It's not like we're creating an entirely new source of energy or doing these crazy things, but it's more of just applying existing technologies in a way that makes sense logistically, operationally, financially, and for the planet as well. And it's something that a lot of these organizers they're focused on, or even just production, like they're focused on their set, they're focused on their experience, and the sustainability side of it isn't really something that they've come to understand. That's at least where we found the biggest role that we can play, is at least kind of that educational piece. If we can show people that, okay, like reusable cups are here and they can actually be done in a cost-effective way. Renewable energy, maybe not integrating 100% renewable energy, but there's ways that you can hybridize your battery systems to at
Yeah.
least make improvements and reduce fuel. Like a lot of these things are there. People just think like, oh, we can't do this or it's going to cost too much, but there's always that step in the right direction that is available.
You know what really pisses me off and gets me, and I see this everywhere. It's the labeling of the waste streams, right? Of the garbages or whatever it is. Like I see it all over the place, even festivals that are like somewhat eco. It's like it's still not obvious, even at the mall or anywhere. It's not obvious what goes in what garbage bin, and then the thing isn't tailored to those waste streams, right? So have you, I mean, how are you doing that at festivals that have 10,000 people or more?
Oh, it's so tough. And like specifically, so like we worked with Outside Festival this past summer. It's like a new festival by Outside Magazine specifically, but it's like a 20,000 people, Denver, Colorado, and the main issue with Denver proper as a city is they don't accept food serveware for industrial compost. But there is one compost provider that we found in the Denver area. Shout out to Scraps, unbelievable company. They accept they accept compostable foodware, and they have the actual infrastructure and machinery to actually compost it. And so created a partnership with them where we essentially were able to accept that, haul it to them, have them essentially deal with it. But it's something where everyone at the festival, who's mainly from Denver, is not used to
Yeah.
composting their foodware because it's in the city not allowed. So every
Yeah.
had volunteers posted at most of these stations, a lot of the high traffic ones, especially near food court and everything, essentially trying to educate people
Yeah.
and tell like as they were doing it, gamify it a little bit, make it a little bit fun, in terms of like, oh, like, did you know like we actually can compost that just in this environment because it gets very controlled. We have the right partnerships. It is something that is so case by case. I think the one thing that even in kind of an MSA webinar that I was in was very clear is you can have a standardized procedure and approach, and you should have a standardized procedure and approach, but the actual execution is just so variable.
Yeah.
And in New Orleans, where like last recycling didn't exist a few years ago, you wouldn't be able to do that when like in Denver, it's easier to establish those partnerships, or in California, so to say. So it's very difficult, and we try to, as best as we can, create those relationships when like where we can, and then have the volunteers and like actual manpower on site to like focus on educating people as best as they can. There's also really unique innovations, like intuitive AI. They have this bin called Oscar Sort, which is like literally looks at what item you have and then will tell you like, oh, this should go into the recycling versus waste. And for like stadiums and arenas, um, great opportunity to at least get fans to understand in a more engaging way than normal waste bin is, I would say.
Totally. They actually have that bin at the CBC Broadcast Center in Toronto. We've
I
profiled
love
that before. Yeah. Yeah. It's super cool. It's super cool.
Great name.
What's, yeah, no.
it.
What's that kind of next level that you see kind of the next step? I mean, it sounds like, while you might have standardized processes, it's that kind of infrastructure side that needs to coalesce, talk to each other. Are there kind of industry groups of folks? I know there are city, consortiums and whatnot that exist. Are there any efforts to standardize this kind of stuff in the US or regionally? Does that happen?
Yes. So at least in terms of standardization in different senses. So I'd say at least on the more local legislative or policy side, there's the idea of like three stream recycling, compost, and landfills becoming more commonplace nationwide. In like certain areas of California and in Denver, they mandate it for certain parks and event sites specifically. And so having more national standardization with those types of um, policies would be huge, so that you can actually get a little bit more standardized in your execution, knowing exactly that the infrastructure is there to support it. In terms of report, an interesting thing I think that's kind of been doing right now is by MIT Environmental Solutions Initiative. It's like called the Climate Machine, funded by Live Nation, Coldplay, and a few others. Is essentially the idea of like standardizing data more so,
Mhm.
reporting and trying to create, at least from what I understand of it, it's kind of asking some important questions like, is scope one, two, and three the best way to be thinking about events? Or is there like another framework that should be better, more appropriate? And like the emissions factors, for example, that people use to actually calculate emissions for different events. I've seen so much variance. And to me, that's like very disheartening, because like there should be a pretty standardized emissions factor for like this activity most likely is going to emit this much carbon. And seeing that much variance makes me know that like a lot of the data that's being reported right now isn't the most accurate, specifically in kind of more of the event landscape. And so finding ways to standardize the data side of things, I think is where there needs to be a lot of work. Because I think once data becomes more standardized, people will take it seriously. Once people take data seriously, then they're going to want to make improvements because they have the data to back it up. So to me, it's like data is the groundwork of like, once we have the data in a really tight place, that then will create this urgency within the market for people to actually do things. But right now, there's no urgency because they're not collecting data. They have no idea of what their current impacts are. They have no need to report it, no desire to report it. So data becoming more integral, I think, is kind of like that huge standardized piece that will then push all these other things forward. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw that happen almost 10 years ago on the energy side of things, and still is to this day. But I mean, people just plug in a generator or turn it on, plug in a generator, and then just, or sorry, turn it on, plug into the generator, and just like let it run. Right? They don't really know how much power they're using or how much fuel they're using, and they're just like, wow, that's just the way it is. And the second that we were able to tell people exactly to the watt what they were using and how long it would last and what that impact would be and how to quantify that from a GHG emission standpoint, it started to really change people's awareness around energy. And Zena and Creative BC and Real Green also started, using energy calculators and carbon calculators, and Albert as well in the UK. So yeah, I think that data part is huge, but waste is such a weird one because, even in most municipalities, right? You alluded to it, there's barely recycling. There's barely food, compost stuff. How do you eat, like, even like having a number one plastic and a number five plastic and everything else can't be recycled. How are you addressing that on an event site? Are you working with the event operator to really manage what's going onto the event site with all the vendors, and then you're managing the waste at the end of it? Is it that tight, or is it there's other
Yes,
parts of it that are quite
it has
frustrating?
to be. It has to be, especially with a festival where it's happening for 2 to 3 days out of 365. Almost all the work is happening in those 363 days. Um, so the whole idea of the way that we work specifically is we call it like agreements. So we essentially create like hyper specific agreements to each festival, lays out kind of the high level policies, and then we make it for each vendor. So food vendors get a very specific one, beverage vendors get a different one, service providers, like whoever's doing the energy, the waste, the water, sanitation, versus any market or like a market vendor, like general sponsor, those types. So break it out into each kind of group and then send them essentially this agreement, which they, on almost every case, it's either mandatory or very, very encouraged for them to sign it and send it back to us. So we're actually keeping track of like, these are the vendors that are engaging heavily with us. These are the ones that have responded. We're communicating directly with all of them. And essentially ensuring that they're doing everything that they need to be doing. So we have partnerships in place where like we get discounts and have essentially like a specific URL made for each event. They'll say like, here's all the items that are allowed. So if you're a sponsor who needs sample cups, order
Yeah.
from here. If you're a food vendor and you're ordering spoons, knives, whatever it is, order from here. And so we have that specific URL that's made for each event, that makes it very easy for all the vendors, stakeholders to get the materials they need. Um, Experience though has always told us like there will be vendors who just do not listen and follow through with that. So
Yeah.
we found ourselves on site, when we are on site, essentially acting as kind of a liaison between the waste hauler, like the actual, sorry, to take it a step back, material procurement is kind of that step one, which we really focus on because you predetermine the waste diversion rate and how much waste is brought on site before the event happens. We then always contract out and work with different partners kind of nationwide to actually do the on-site waste management and diversion efforts. And then similarly with the hauling. And so we'll work with them to create the different hauling partnerships. So whether it's for compost, whether it is for glass specific or cardboard or whatever the actual waste stream is. And found ourselves in situations on site where we've set up this material procurement policy and landscape where like only these materials are here, but we're identifying items on site through the people who are back of house actually decontaminating all the waste. And they're like, hey, like a lot of these plastic sachets are here. And like we'll go find the specific vendor, be like, told you couldn't bring those, and like change it out in real time. When we can. There's obviously some opportunities where we're not able to do that, but like when we're able to get involved and like in real time stop it, that's the way that we do it. It's difficult, but that's kind of the way that we work, with waste, and always following the waste hierarchy where it's like, can we just eliminate waste from the site? And we do that through reusable programs. If we can't eliminate waste, how can we at least eliminate it from the landfill? And so that's kind of introducing recyclables, compostables, those types of things. And then it's worst case scenario, we'll have landfill waste, but rarely will that happen. That's it. In most cases, we're getting our waste diversion rates at least 80% or higher.
And just, we've talked to some event operators as well, kind of learning that side of it too. And then, you're talking about all these, these various vendors and agreements and whatnot. Do you find like maybe on the energy side, or yeah, it could be materials and waste as well, but just thinking like, are these folks seeing the connection between what they're doing and kind of the broader thing? Or like, for example, on the energy consumption side, like, planning power needs and whatnot, is, we're, like if people bring additional stuff that we didn't, that the event didn't know about, and then they're plugging in, that kind of throws off the plan a bit. Are these vendors seeing themselves as part of a system, or are they really operating kind of individually and in a silo?
For the most part, they're all operating independently, and in a silo. And we try to create an overall cohesion, because the way that I put it is, for sustainability to truly happen at an event, you need buy-in from the festival organizer, like the real owner, like an investor, financier, whoever you want to put it, but like they need to be bought in, for then the actual like day-to-day operators to be bought in and to like actually lead out that vision, for then the actual stakeholders and all these different vendors to be bought in, for then the fans to feel it. But if any one of those kind of marks is missed, the fans aren't really going to feel it. If all the vendors are just working in their silo and don't know about sustainability till the day of, and then here like not even, but like maybe some of the bar staff like have no idea what's going on. Something where just like the fan experience, they're gonna miss out on it and it's not gonna hit home. So we've always, and like with these agreements, it's like one small but simple way to like really make sure that everyone knows beforehand. They have to acknowledge it, sign it, send it to us. And it says like this takes all of us. Like we cannot do sustainability alone. It's not going to take one person from the team, but it's going to take everyone being aware of it and doing very small, simple things. Not much more than really being aware of it to actually help us execute it. And so that's really the way that we've always tried to position it. But with that said, it's like and it depends, because there's like the sanitation providers. These are guys who are just providing like porta potties for events, and they have like 30 different events a weekend, and like they're busy. They have a lot of things going on. So it's like for them to feel like truly, truly bought in beyond just like this is one of our gigs this weekend is always difficult to do. That's why it's always like I see it as these guys work in their silo, they're service providers, they're providing their service. But overarchingly, I think that whenever we're working with an event, it's very clearly a different experience for them, in the fact that they're signing these agreements beforehand, and kind of enacting to these certain policies, so to say, that we've set beforehand.
I've got a question, because I've been seeing, obviously, out of COVID, there was a huge spike in festivals. Everybody was getting out there, and then now we seem to be on the back end of that. Some festivals are having, cost overruns, right? Costs have doubled, porta potty costs have doubled. Everything's kind of gone up in services costs, and this now adds another cost, right? In some form. Are you seeing those headwinds coming into some of the festival organizers, and that are having troubles getting the right people or getting it, break even? And then all of a sudden you're in there with sustainability saying, hey guys, it's important to do that. How are you finding that sort of tightrope walk through this? Because it's going to be going on for the next couple of years, right? As festivals readjust and try to figure out where they are in the mix.
It's so tough. And even this next year, it's like two of our partners are taking like hiatus for next year. And just like it is tough. Festival business is tough to begin with, but especially post COVID, it's been, and with COVID, it's just been obviously through so much. It's very difficult. Because if I would say, yeah, there's very few festivals that are really profiting and making a lot of money, and those are usually owned by a lot of these large organizations. There's very few independent festivals that are doing super well. So it's always an uphill battle, even for our services, so to say, because we're usually working on retainer with a lot of these different events. So for us to articulate the worth and value of them paying that retainer, is always just an uphill battle to begin with. And then once we're in, it's always, I'd say, the cost of sustainability is definitely higher in some cases, but there's ways where and the way that we've always focused is reducing the burden on the organizer. So for example, with compostable serveware, organizers not fronting that cost. They're just mandating every vendor that comes into their event has to eat that cost. And so there's certain ways where it's like we can ensure these sustainable practices while reducing the financial liability on their event, so to say. And then also work on creating these financial or revenue drivers. So with certain programs, there's very clear ways that we can either articulate new revenue through reusable cup programs and things like that, or cost savings. And so like a reduction in fuel through hybridized battery systems. So like we've been able to articulate tens of thousands of dollars of savings in direct diesel costs through hybridizing battery systems. And what may be a little bit more upfront cost to do something like that, you then kind of make up in value, at least underwrite a little bit of it through the reduction in fuel costs and then through the media and PR of like, look at what we actually did and the improve, like the fan experience improves and all those certain types of things. So that's one way that we've always done it. And then the way that we're really trying to focus on, at least just moving forward, is the idea of brand sponsors. It's no secret that they're the ones when fans
Mhm.
are maybe making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, artists similarly, event organizers barely scraping by, but like these brands are making billions a year. So how can we engage these same brands that have a lot of these external climate goals, are already activating at a lot of these events in really ungenuine and not very meaningful ways? How can we essentially kind of be the conduit that allows them to actually have a genuine impact on site and then also engage with these fans through that kind of environmental activation or platform? And so that's at least where we've been focusing a lot and getting these brands to participate. I think it's to some extent their duty or obligation to really kind of play that financier role in a lot of this, since very clear that organizers do not have it. Even if the event has budget to do sustainability, it does not have a budget to make the entire festival like 100% renewable energy, fully circular, zero waste. It's that like there's additional support that's required no matter what.
Yeah.
That's the role that I think brands play.
Until your stars and talent demand it.
Exactly.
And they're going to play an instrumental role in this, like we are seeing with Coldplay and Show Power, right? What they're doing.
100%.
But also, I mean, I think it's really going to have to, the musicians and artists are going to have to be aware of this and then embody it, right, in their work and in their messaging. So I think that's going to be a big part of the next couple of years. We're going to see that probably come on full steam, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm just curious, just in a festival or an event that you have felt has gone really well. You had, many of the elements there. It worked really well. Have you noticed, in that scenario, a positive fan experience? Do they notice? Do they feel it? As you kind of said earlier, does it make a difference?
100%. Um, and I think there's very small ways that like we've been able to measure and quantify that in a lot of different ways, but like through eco bans, quite simply, just by having an opportunity for fans to get involved, we've been able to quantifiably measure exactly how many fans are willing to get involved, how much they're willing to spend, all that type of stuff. And then all the people who purchase eco bans, at least, getting so many emails, send customer feedback surveys, and people love it and love the experience with it as well. Definitely a lot of things we can do to improve it and are working on that, but specifically like eco bins, one small way. And then in the events, I think there's just so many other more intangible ways, but just like seeing of like a sea of people all using reusable cups and like
Hmm.
no plastic in sight. It's like I think that improves the fan experience. And like at least for me, I know is like, wow, like this feels different to your typical just like event where there's plastic all over the grounds. Like there's really no waste on the grounds. Throughout the entire festival day. People are reusing their cups. They get to take home like a nice memento as well. Um, so I think there's just overall makes sense. It's like when you look at what like batteries can do, where it's just like it's less smelly, it's less loud. Like it makes sense that improves fan experience rather than like a loud and smelly machine. Same with like cups. Like people, I don't think love plastic and like reusing like using
I
plastic
love
similarly.
microplastics in my brain.
Exactly. Yeah. Said no one ever. But
Yeah.
these types of things make sense. And so at least personally, I felt it. I think just seeing smiles on Finn's faces. And yeah, knowing the festivals I've been to, it's such a big difference, even spending $80 on water when I have to buy an individual water bottle every time over an entire festival duration versus just being able to have free access to water and reuse my cup. It's just such an improved fan experience. And then also for the planet, best possible improve kind of improvements as well.
Yeah. And isn't fan experience like what it's kind of all about? Like, like without that, without a positive fan experience, you kind of don't have a successful event, right? So,
100%. And because some organizers, to them, it's like fan experience is just the curation and the talent. Like if we're bringing out the talent, we'll sell the tickets, and like that's good enough. And then other event organizers understand that it's about like the experience. They're trying to create a brand, and yeah, an experience that people remember and love. And so it's like those are the promoters that I think are always a little bit more aligned with these types of efforts and are always looking to improve the fan experience rather than just making a quick buck, so to say.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Love it.
I
Love
know.
it. Oh, Jonah, your enthusiasm is infectious, and I'm sure our listeners and viewers will feel it as well. And you're talking to two kindred spirits here on that. Um, so our last question that we ask all our guests is, if you were to create a new playbook, or guiding principles about sustainability and entertainment, what would be the first three or whatever you would think about putting into this playbook?
Ooh, it's a great and tough question. I would say playbook number one, or just rule number one is the day you plant the seed isn't the day it grows. And the idea by that is like you need to plant the seed and you need to water it every single day. And so it's not like you're gonna go from A to Z. You can't, unless you have infinite dollars and a lot of time on your plate. But you can always make those marginal improvements. And as I was saying earlier, a lot of these things already exist. It just takes a little bit of time and energy to find it, or even to find the people who can help you find it, so to say. But these things are out there and they exist. And so just getting started today is the best thing you can do, and things will improve over time. So that's say number one. Number two, it's so hard to just make this three things.
You don't have, it doesn't have to be three things.
Yeah. Um, Number two, I'd just say the idea of circularity. And so as I was kind of going back, where it's like when the ideal is to have a fully circular event where there's nothing going to landfill. And so how can you think and redesign a festival kind of from the ground up with that in mind? Where the intention and objective is zero landfill, zero recyclable, zero waste. Like how can you actually create those systems? And maybe it's totally not feasible yet, but like working from that ideal backwards is when you can actually create the most effective and most circular system. And then similarly, I'd kind of say like the idea of electrification too. I just kind of, to break it down, it's like circular. You make it fully circular and fully like electrified. That's when there's really no emissions and no waste. And so, similarly, in kind of that circularity principle, if you can work from the principle of like, how can we fully power this either through renewable sources and through batteries and not have any diesel on site or strictly as backups, and then working from that. I think like those are the three things, but starting with the idea that it will take time, that nothing
But you got to
good.
start now.
Exactly. Got it. It'll take time, but like start today. And you'll be way ahead of the game is always the way I see it.
Amazing. I love it. I love it. You are literally saying words I have said before. So this is just really like I'm so excited to hear this. Like I'm so excited you're doing this. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm so excited you guys are doing this. As I was kind of saying earlier, I think a big part of this is changing public perception around it. And so creating more awareness, more channels for awareness too, and showing people, especially within this space that is so influential culturally, that a lot of this stuff can be done is huge. So
Mhm.
honored to have played a small part in this as well.
Well,
Uh,
thank you. Thanks
thank you,
for
Jonah.
being on and sharing your experience. It's amazing. Hopefully super inspiring for a lot of people out there who are like, what do I do? What do I do? Create your own lane, like do it.
Yeah.
Right.
And Jonah, tell us just a little bit about Green Disco, how they can find you.
You can find us on greendisco.earth, not .com, .earth. Similarly, LinkedIn is Green Disco. We're not very active on Instagram or other social medias, but Green Disco Group is our Instagram. We post ever so often when there's a bigger update. But yeah, mainly getting active on LinkedIn this next year is one of our internal objectives. We've always been a little more focused on the actual work than talking about it, but I mean, even in talking with you guys today, it's very clear that talking about this stuff is actually hugely important in actually creating that cultural change too. So something we're starting to do.
That's
Amen.
awesome.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks,
Thank you
Jonah.
guys. Enjoy the day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hello, entertainment industry. Something I've been working on over the past year with partners U.S. Green Building Council California and Aerith Environmental is the development of the Sustainable Production for Entertainment Certification, or SPEC, as we like to call it.
It's the first certification for the entertainment workforce, and it's now live for folks to sign up.
Yeah, go to the U.S. Green Building Council California website at usgbc-ca.org to learn more about it and to register for an upcoming class. This is a great way to up your sustainability game and gain a professional certification. So this is for you. See you in class. Our designer is Aaliyah Kane. Music is by Peter Chapman. Our producer is Colin Miller.